Welcome back. So as we keep talking about vendor management and how that impacts a company and the business operations of a given company, we've talked about the importance of maintaining a good system of record of all your vendors and the metadata, plus the entire life cycle from the business need through the approval all the way through the renewal and potential termination of a vendor. So now we're going to dig in a little bit more deeply to that top half, how you add vendors to your company. So it starts with the business need. What is the goal of a particular piece of software or particular vendor? And typically, in order to evaluate this need and understand it, you want to know where that request comes in. A lot of times these requests for new technology will come in from individuals or teams or other groups that really have a good sense of what their key need is for their function. Once that request comes in, you want to understand things like obviously who's the requester and reasons, and get that context of what department and team it's being used in. All of this information justifying that business need will help for your approval process because it'll give you the context to really understand the approval. And then as you're going through the approval, one critical thing is understanding who is involved in your organization in approving something. And typically what we'll see is a combination of IT and security to make sure that that particular vendor meets your internal security and compliance requirements. Finance, obviously, to understand the budget and potentially procurement, working with finance. And potentially legal to review the terms of service and other contract to understand part of the approval process. In addition to, once you've identified who, you really need to understand what is your approval process. What are the steps you need to go through? What do they need to check off? And then, how are you running this process, ideally in an auditable format? Because once a vendor is approved, you want to understand what the justification was for that so that you can control a little bit how these new vendors are getting into your company. And then finally, post-approval, you need to actually get this into the hands of the people that requested it and maybe more. So when you think about rolling out, you also need to understand is who will be the users, the admins, to help manage this particular piece of software. You also need to understand, are there any key integrations for this piece of software? Most technology these days does not exist in a vacuum. It needs to plug into your CRM if it's a marketing piece of software to understand your customers and their lifecycle stage. It might need to plug into your engineering systems if it's closer to production and engineering and development. So you really want to understand what are those integrations. And then finally, based on who's using it, thinking about how do you actually roll this out to people? Is there any training involved? Do you need to do some internal coaching? Do you need to update some of your internal process documentation? And by reviewing the request, approval, and rollout process for a new vendor, it'll help keep you much more productive because you'll be able to make sure you're adopting the right vendors for the right reasons and getting them out to folks who need it in a streamlined process. Blissfully will help manage all of these processes in a single place, including that auditable trail, and automatically update your system of record, which is really important to keep up to date. Happy to share more about that. And next time, we'll go into a little bit more depth about the back end of the vendor lifecycle management.